Hi friends, it's Hannah from Handmade by Design, and I'm so glad you're here. Today I'm going to be making wall art by using different types and different weights of fabric and fusing them together to create stunning pieces of works of art to hang on your wall. The materials that we'll use for this project are water, a disposable cup marked at 4 cups and 2 cups, a pair of scissors, a craft knife, a measuring device, a bucket, white glue, fabric. I chose black and white checked fabric and black and white striped fabric. I cut 2 pieces of foam board, 16 inches by 24 inches. I also used deco mesh, the black and white striped deco mesh in the top right hand corner from the Dollar Tree, and black and white flowered check deco mesh, also from the Dollar Tree. To begin with, I cut the fabric probably 2 to 3 inches wider than the foam board. I love the black and white check and stripe, but you can choose any 2 complementary colors that you like in the fabric and also in the deco mesh. As long as they're the same colors and have a different pattern than the pattern that your material does, you'll be in good shape. Once I've cut the fabric, I'm now going to stiffen it and make designs with the fabric on the foam board. So for this, I used 2 cups of water and 2 cups of glue, and I mixed them thoroughly together into a bucket. And I only work on one piece of fabric at a time. And I start with the black and the white fabric, and I immerse it into the bucket, and I make sure that this fabric is totally saturated. And once it is, I take it out of the bucket and I wring the fabric out very well, but it's still very wet. And I lay it directly over the foam board and I begin to form a design. And the way that I do this is I start directly in the middle of the fabric, in the center of the foam board, and I start to make a pinwheel with my thumb and forefinger, which creates a circle. And then as I do, it kind of automatically creates little pleats around the fabric. But with my thumb and forefinger, I go around all of the fabric and I make sure that the pleats are standing up. And I leave the fabric alone and allow it to dry. Next, I add the black and white checked stripe fabric into the water and the glue. I submerge it. I make sure it's thoroughly saturated. I wring it out, and then I lay that on the next piece of the foam board. I'm going to create a different design with the black and white checked fabric. So I lay the fabric onto the foam board, and I spread it out evenly. And then I begin to make my design. The design on the black and white fabric, and I'm sorry it's kind of out of frame at the top, is I pinch the top at the top right hand side of the fabric, and I leave like a little tail on the top of the fabric, and you'll see it in a minute. And when I do that, it forms like little accordion pleats all the way down the fabric, and I work with those, all just with my thumb and forefinger, just like I did with the black and white stripe fabric, until all of the lines on the black and white check fabric stand up on their own, and I allow that to dry completely. And this is the top of the fabric. You'll see how it comes above the fabric and it almost forms a fan. And it almost looks like we have two types of abstract fans on the board and above the board. And I just keep working with it and keep spreading it out. Keep working with those pleats until I am completely happy with the way that they look. And then I leave the fabric to dry for 24 hours. Once it's dry, the fun really begins. On the black and white stripe fabric with the pinwheels, I look over the fabric and I love the way that it turned out. The fabric dries and it's stiff and the design came out beautiful. And for this fabric, I used the black and white striped deco mesh. And I used 2 rolls of the deco mesh from the Dollar Tree. And I'm going to be hot gluing the deco mesh onto the black and white striped fabric. So I'm putting my silicone finger protectors on and using hot glue. I pinch the end of the deco mesh together. I add hot glue to the pinched end and then I twist it so that it forms a point. And once it does, I hot glue it and push it as far as I can into the pinwheel and glue it into the center. I pull my deco mesh out into a pleat and I leave the deco mesh a few inches longer than the pleat, and I move on to the next pleat into the deco mesh, and I cut that a little bit longer than the material. I move on to the next one. I add that in the next piece of the pinwheel, and I go all around the entire piece and add the pointed deco mesh into each little part of the pinwheel and make sure that every pleat has got deco mesh on it that begins in the pinwheel. And the wreath begins, or the art piece begins to get very full, and it really looks beautiful. I take the ends of the deco mesh and I begin to fold them underneath the fabric. And as you can see, it's creating a beautiful design. They're both striped fabric, but one is mesh, and you can tell that it has a design on it, and yet you can see through it to the stripes on the original fabric. Once I'm happy with the way this piece of artwork is going to look, I start cutting because there's quite a bit of fabric and deco mesh overhanging the foam board. So I cut the fabric and the deco mesh. I don't pull the deco mesh straight. I let it stay puffy. But I cut the fabric and the deco mesh much closer to the foam board so that there's only about 1.5 inches of fabric that's longer than the foam board. And some of the deco mesh is a little bit longer, but that's okay. I just glue it all to the back of the foam board, and the deco mesh pieces that are too long, I can cut off later. And it is starting to really look like a beautiful, interesting piece of art. I turn the artwork over back and forth to make sure that I am adhering the deco mesh where I want it to be. So I'm really working on placement of the deco mesh and to see how far from the material the deco mesh will be. In some places I needed to tighten up the deco mesh or move it a little bit to the left or to the right because I wanted all of the fabric to be completely covered with the deco mesh. So I made sure that the deco mesh was overlapping in all the areas before I would turn it over and glue it back down on the back of the project. Once I'm completely satisfied with the way that the deco mesh looks over the material, I make a bow with wire framed ribbon, and I believe I got the ribbon at the dollar store, and it's a buffalo check ribbon, and I hot glued the ribbon onto the center of the piece, and I left long tails on the ribbon to make it look more interesting. I don't measure the ribbon, but I make the loops on the bow according to the size on my project. I cut off a small piece of wire and I take buffalo check ribbon. I'm pretty sure I purchased this ribbon on Amazon, and I leave a pretty long tail. I'm sorry, I don't measure it. I kind of just eyeball everything. And then I make 3 loops on either side of the ribbon. And I make sure that the loops are all of the same size. And this ribbon has the same print on both sides, so you don't have to worry about twisting the ribbon at all. I pinch the loops in between my fingers, and then I cut off the second ribbon that's going to hang down from the bow. I then take the wire and I pinch tightly in the center of the bow, and I twist the wire onto the bow, and then I fluff the bow until I'm completely happy with the way that the bow is going to look. And what is so interesting is there's 2 different kinds of stripes on the art piece, and now we're adding a different element. We're adding a different kind of fabric. We're adding a bow, so a different perspective, and we're adding a check rather than a stripe to add interest. And this ribbon is ready to be glued onto our first piece of artwork. And with that, our first piece of artwork in a set of 2 is complete. I hope I'm getting a close enough photograph of this so that you can see all of the difference of the layers of the material. The material in the back that is very stiff is just so attractive looking next to the deco mesh that's flowing and freeform that you can see through, and then the ribbon and the bow that's a different fabric and a different pattern. I was really happy with the way that the first of these 2 art projects turned out, and I think together they're going to make a beautiful pair. Now that the second piece of our artwork is completely dry, and I love the shape and the look of this, we can begin to cover it with deco mesh. We use black deco mesh with white flowers on it, and this was also from the Dollar Tree, and I used 2 rolls of it, and I followed the exact same process. I rolled the deco mesh into a point, and inserted the point at the top of the artwork. I tucked it in between the tightest piece of the artwork in between the pleats, and I made sure that every pleat in the artwork had a piece of deco mesh. This ended up being too much deco mesh for this fabric because this deco mesh with the flowers on it is almost opaque. You cannot see through it as well as you could the black and white stripe deco mesh. So if you decide to do the project exactly as I did, you only need half the amount of deco mesh. And if you do the project and use other types of material and deco mesh, just make sure that the deco mesh that you use doesn't completely overpower the material underneath like this deco mesh did. Once I applied all of it, you almost couldn't see the bottom material. So in the end, I ended up removing probably a little bit more than half of the deco mesh, and then I was completely satisfied. It looked beautiful. But as you can see now with the deco mesh, it doesn't look good. You can't see the material underneath. And I also trimmed this material and the deco mesh down to around 1 inch around the foam board before I started gluing it in. I added a black and white ribbon with long tails to this piece as well. For the hangers for both pieces, I used a pipe cleaner, glued the pipe cleaner to the back of the artwork directly to the foam board, and then glued a piece of masking tape over each piece of the chenille sticks to give it added strength. But these were very light. This makes a wonderful hanger for them. Here you can see where I have removed at least half of the deco mesh, and I am truly happy with the way that this second piece came out. I think it's absolutely beautiful now. The other deco mesh was covering up the black and white check fabric, and what a difference just removing that extra deco mesh looks. And here it is. I have the two pieces hanging in a niche in my hallway, and I'm so happy with the way that they turned out. They really make a stunning pair. Even though they're different, they have enough similarity to where they look like they were made to go together. I styled a few different settings around the artwork, and this is a fall and winter setting, and I think they look absolutely beautiful in the summer and the spring and the winter and the fall. It's going to be really fun changing up all the decorations around this artwork in the niche. This is more of a winter look where I put dark greens around it, and I have dark wooden angels, and then I have 2 trees that I have made out of dried fruit at the bottom. So I can see that they're going to be just as beautiful in the wintertime as they are in the spring and summer, and I can leave this artwork up all year around. Thank you so much for watching the video. I truly appreciate it, and I hope that this inspires you to make something beautiful. If you enjoyed this project, please hit the like button and share it with your friends. This helps my YouTube channel to grow. Hit the subscribe button and the notification button, and you'll be notified every time that I put out a new video. Thanks again, and I will see you next time.